Welcome to the Southern Voice Rock Show. Here's your host, Jim Harris.
Welcome to the Southern Voice Rock Show. We have three incredible guitarists for you today. Moses Moe, founding member and guitarist for the legendary funk rock band Mother's Finest, is here. Rick Steier, guitarist for Kingdom Come, Warrant and Wild Horses, is with us. And Richie Ranno from Stories and Starz. Let's get right into it. We're so excited to have Mo from Mother's Finest with us today. Mo, welcome to the Southern Voice Rock Show.
Oh, thank you very much, Jim. Nice to be here.
You guys are back out on the road again for the year. You got, a couple of dates under your belt and looks like quite a few scheduled in the Southeast?
Yeah, we're playing out a little bit at a time. Got a tour at the end of the year in Germany. We're just playing a little bit, still taking it kind of easy, and our singer Murdoch is recovering from a couple of medical things, so he's giving him time to recuperate, and hopefully everything will just come back together, and we'll be carrying on for 2024.
Well, you guys only have, 53 years under your belt, so I'm sure you're still trying to kind of sort it out.
Yeah, but we still got to practice a little bit to remember that stuff. And that never changes, We could remember it when we were really young.
You mentioned your European tour coming up later this year. I think that's a good topic to dive into for our listeners. You guys have been huge in Europe for years, and Europe has been a pretty regular tour for you guys, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit different than it is over here. I mean, people still got that I want to rock kind of feel, but there's a lot of places there, a lot of stages still that have nice PA systems and lights. And a lot of bands that still do it the old kind of way where people just play their instruments, and see what happens. And that's attractive to me. And it's the way we've always done it. And I think it's attractive to them. So we have a nice kinship with them. And they're great people. We always have good gigs. And it's a wonderful country. But love America. Love to come back.
One good thing about Mother's catalog is most of your albums are available digitally. The 76 Mother's Finest album, Another Mother Further, Mother Factor live album. And, I would encourage our listeners that, have been to a lot of Mother's shows and have a lot of favorites to dig into the deeper cuts on those albums. There's some great music there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't get airplay. People know us for probably 6 or 8 songs that got played in the 70s, And that's okay because they know more of us personally just from playing around. We've always been a road band. We like to play on the stage and we like it lights on and everybody's watching and let's see what kind of excitement we can create. And that's what we still do and what we love to do, and we'll do it from now on.
Well, you guys shared management back in the 70s with some really substantial rockers. Lieber Krebs also represented Rex out of Atlanta, Ted Nugent, Aerosmith, and a lot of those folks, in talking to them, they bring Mother's Finest up to me without me ever having to mention it.
Cool. We got really lucky. I mean, had some good management, and there's always seemed to have been hard for people, the record companies, to find a place to put us. I mean, in the 70s, there was still a thing. It was, if you're a black band, you didn't play rock, and if you're a white band, that's what you did, and you didn't play funk. But we kind of started out mixing that stuff up and didn't really care what anybody thought. It was their problem to make a box for us to fit in. And people always understood, too. They never had a problem.
Well, I'm going to circle back around in a minute to a couple of things that have been said about you and Mother's, and I'm interested to hear your reaction. But before we get off of your catalog, I would also recommend that people check out the live album, which opens up with a tremendous cover of Somebody to Love, and also Iron Age from '81, which was probably the hardest edge rock that you guys ever did. Is that a fair assessment?
Oh, absolutely. And that was the Lieber Krebs days. And their idea was they wanted somebody to put on tour with Aerosmith. And maybe because Aerosmith was having a rough time at that point. They also were grooming Ted Nugent, put him on shows, when Aerosmith was doing not so great. And Ted Nugent would end up stealing the show. But that's just the way it went. They had both groups into the management thing, so whatever they did was good. We were fortunate just to be in front of those audience, play with those guys are great, and those are great musicians. They left a mark that's going to be around for everybody to see for, next couple of 100 years.
You've also had a couple of ventures outside of Mothers. You cut a couple of albums with a band Illusion that you formed in the 80s. Also some pretty wicked rock and roll there.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we're working on trying to get all of our rights back. It's been 30 years, I think, and that's when everything goes back to the artist. And if we can get that all, the business side of it all together, then we're going to re-release those Illusion albums, have it as part of a catalog. Right now, we can't do anything. They don't get promoted. They just kind of sit there. So anybody that heard about it before, you have to do a lot of looking to try to dig it up.
I looked on iTunes, and I did find the first album, but it's under the profile for a rapper that uses the stage name Illusion.
Right, yeah. If you catch it, it's almost a mistake. We'll have it out and have it so that you can have access to it and people can enjoy it. We did it.
We're definitely hoping the second album comes back to availability as well, because they're both really good albums. I want to share two things with you. Mother's Finest and you personally have come up in a couple of conversations in the last week, and I want to tell you what was said, and I want to get your reaction. The first was from Alan Walden, and for our listeners that maybe need a refresher on Alan, he was a co-founder of Capricorn Records. He discovered Leonard Skinner out of a warehouse audition. He signed Otis Redding, Sam and Dave, The Outlaws, Boz Scaggs. Pretty formidable name in rock and roll. And in a conversation with him, I just asked him, I said, of all the bands that you've seen over the years, who really left an impression? And he said, I'm 79 years old. And I guess by definition, you could say, who would I be willing to travel to go see? And he said, that would be Mother's Finest.
Well, now see what a huge compliment that is. Somebody that really knows his stuff in the business. Somebody that really has offered something to the world. That opinion, that's just humbling. What a nice thing for him to say.
He's a super nice man, but that was totally unsolicited. So then to follow that up, and you mentioned, you guys shared an agency and have shared the stage a lot of times with Ted Nugent. Just a couple of days ago, I was talking with Derek St. Holmes, and my question to him was something similar to the question to Alan. I said, of all the bands that you've crossed paths with over the years, who really left the biggest impression? And he thought about it for a second, and he said, actually, I'll tell you what he said about you first. He said he's a great guitar player and just one of the super, super nice guys. About Mother's Finest, and this is what really resonated with me, he said, they were an incredible band. They should have been as big as Led Zeppelin.
Well, they're as big as we are, I'm grateful for what we got. You never can tell. It's all speculation. Shoulda, woulda, coulda, where you're supposed to be. If you're where you're happy and you're still being productive, man, that's the main thing.
Oh, absolutely. But I think it's awfully high praise for somebody in the industry for you guys to stand out above all of the bands that he's seen and shared a stage with. So I thought that was pretty high praise as well.
Oh, yeah, that's he's a great guy.
You usually have a couple of side projects going. What's going on now?
Well, a couple of things. I play with another band over in Germany called Carl Carlton and the Song Dogs. We've put out, with me and Wizard play out of Mothers in that band over the last 10 or 15 years. We put out 3 or 4 albums. Ian McLagan's on it. He was a good friend on the road with us a bunch. And Bobby Keys from the Stones, the sax player.
Oh, wow.
So, all these connections, that band is doing a lot. We might get back together this year and work on a new record. But at home, I have a band called The Real Cool Band. And it's my solo project, I guess. First time I ever sang in a band. Never having Mother's Finest because Wizard and Joyce and Glenn, they're like Chicago horns or something. They are one thing. 3 of them make one thing. And I've kind of stayed out of that and let them have the thing. But this thing, I've got a lot of songs that I wrote that I sing on. And so I put together a band with my son-in-law, who's a rapper. And my daughter brought him home, and we checked him out. I said, how's this going to go? And then I found out he rapped, and then I found out that he's great. It really blew me away. So we started writing some songs, and we've got an album out right now called Drive-In. And you can check it out if you go to mosesmo.com and look for the RCB connection. And we also have a thing, I want to say something too, where it's the new thing coming up for the solo project is called Kid Cool. And it's basically going to be whatever a rock opera is called right now. The next 10 songs we make are going to tell the story of Kid Cool, who is an everyday kid that's the first time away from home and all the stuff that he might go through. Everybody has that experience. So we have the songs that explain his path. So that's going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to that's going to start probably within the month.
Well, that's awesome. Well, listen, will you kind of stay in touch and let us keep our listeners posted on developments and, any changes with mothers and any of these side projects? Because I know our folks will be really interested.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, we'll keep in touch. Yeah, and play some RCB. We got no way really to get out. We don't have management. We're just out here by ourselves, and we really haven't pushed it that hard yet. But anybody we know in the business, if any people out there listening, if you look us up online, if you hear something you like, call your radio station and say, I'd like to hear that. Basically, the people out there are managers now and our record company, too.
Social media has certainly changed the way that music gets out to the audience and the potential audience. And, you guys are certainly doing the right thing by getting it out that way. And if folks will share it when they hear something they like, that won't do anything but help you expand that footprint.
Absolutely. And if you get a chance and take a notion to, we got a video out now as our current release, our single. It's called Space Cadet. There's a video out you can go see if you go to mosesmo.com. And if you get a chance to play it, please do and see if you like it.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Mo, thank you so much for being with us today. And thanks for all that you've been bringing to us over half a century of rock. And so glad you guys are still out there doing it.
Well, thank you very much for having me, man. It's great to talk about it. I'm still very involved. None of us feel like slowing down. So we're just going to go with our boots on. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Moses Mo, everyone, from Mother's Finest.
Thank you very much. Talk to you all later.
Hit songs can sometimes have an interesting path to the top. In this week's liner notes, we'll take a look at Jackie Blue by the Ozark Mountain Daredevils. Song was written by drummer Larry Lee about a guy he had known that was a bartender and drug dealer. When the band was in the studio recording the album It'll Shine When It Shines, producer Glenn Johns overheard the song and his immediate response was, no, Jackie has to be a girl. The lyrics were rewritten and the song was included on the album and was the second single, dropped in February 1975. It went to number 3 on the Billboard charts, number 1 on Cashbox, and it was the Ozark Mountain Daredevils' biggest hit. We are so excited to have Rick Steier with us today. Rick, welcome to the Southern Voice Rock Show.
Glad to be here. Thanks, Jim.
You're originally from Louisville, Kentucky, correct?
That is correct, sir.
And you were in a band there that was really, I guess, probably the top local band, City Lights Band, and you guys actually at one time owned your own bar as well, called the City Lights Bar.
We played around town doing one-nighters, wedding receptions, and anniversary, whatever, reunions, and we weren't playing enough, and we were really one of the top bands that was being booked around at that time. So he said, well, we want to play every night. So if you can't play somewhere every night, you open your own place, and then you could play every night. So it started out just as kind of a weird idea, and it actually came to fruition. We opened the club. It started out slow, and then, as you know, it ended up being like the hot spot during that time for live music. There was other things going on, but that's where it all started. We all did a stupid thing and packed up our gear and moved to California, Beverly Hills. No, I'm kidding. We did come out here thinking it would be like, oh, wow, we're so good in Louisville that they're going to love us out here. Well, it didn't quite work out that way. The only people that stayed out here was myself and James Kotak. Now, he's from Louisville, and he ended up playing with the Scorpions for 18 years. So he made a huge move. We came out here. The band kind of fell apart. James and I, Kotak, played in Kingdom Come together. We signed with that label, Polygram, in late 87.
How did the association with Kingdom Come about, Rick?
Well, again, we were just playing in clubs called a Red Onion out here, and someone saw James play. They interviewed him or auditioned him for the singer, which was Lenny Wolf, but Kingdom Come wasn't signed at the time. And he said, man, I'm tired of doing this top 40 stuff. They need a guitar player and keyboard player. Are you interested in auditioning? I said, well, yeah, I'll do that because I'm tired of it too. And that's what happened. So we got Lenny Wolf was the lead singer and the head of the band, started the band. And he said, guys, let's go. He had another guitar player and bass player, and then we coalesced around that group of guys.
Kingdom Come, you guys dropped your first album. That album went gold.
It did.
You guys ended up on the Monsters of Rock tour, and that had to be some huge visibility.
It was, and let me reiterate how extreme that was to go playing clubs in '87 to sharing the stage with Van Halen, Dokken, Scorpions, Metallica, and there we were, Kingdom Come, this little new band out of nowhere. So I literally went from playing clubs in about 4 months being on stage at this venue, the Monsters of Rock. It was quite a shock.
Kingdom Come, that lasted a couple of years for you, right?
Through
the first go-round.
Right. Then we did a second record called In Your Face. And that, I can't remember if that came out in 89 or 90. Then we went our separate ways late 1990 or early 1991. Then James and I, we formed a band called Wild Horses, and we were on Atlantic Records. So this is around 91. The label was real excited about us. We kind of sounded like 80s rock. I mean, if anybody wants to check it out, it's called Wild Horses Bareback. So it was a really good album. The label's really behind us. The producer, everybody was excited about it. And then guess what happened? Nirvana came out. And it was kind of the death knell for any kind of 80s rock sounding band.
With Wild Horses, I mean, you had some serious horsepower. I mean, you went on from there to some high profile gigs. James Kotak, right, as you mentioned, I think from there went to Montrose and then the Scorpions. Is that correct?
Montrose was more of like a side gig for him. It wasn't like a steady thing. He would do some dates with them, whatever. Right after Wild Horses disbanded, James and I again together for the third band in a row, we joined Warrant. That we replaced Joey Allen and Stephen Sweet, the guitar player and drummer, respectively, yeah. And got in that band. They were all living out here close there. You know, if you're out in LA, you know people that are in other bands, so it's not like this big stretch for a. Janie Lane had been doing a side project with one of my old producers from Kingdom Come, and he called me up and said, hey, you want to write with Janie Lane? So I said, sure. We were writing together, and then they fired the drummer and lead guitar player, and then that's when James and I stepped in.
And how long were you with Warrant?
7 years.
Yeah, I think you were on maybe 3 albums. Is that right? 4
if you count the live album.
And how did that come to a parting of the ways?
How the Janie Warren thing ended for me. The independent label said, "Hey guys, we'll sign you," because no one cared about us because we were an '80s band, right? And so this little label said, "We'll sign you if you do a '80s record." And I was over it. I didn't want to do an '80s sounding record, so I left the band and tried to do some independent stuff with other small label stuff.
What was next for you after that period?
Well, I was married in 1998, but then we had kids. So I kind of stayed close to home, raising the kids. My wife was a teacher. And so I really didn't want to tour because it was really important to me to be around with my kids. I've known musicians that they traveled half of the year, more than half of the year, and miss special occasions, birthdays. And I was in a position where I didn't have to do that financially or whatever. So I just started giving guitar lessons. A lot of people were interested. I'm around. I'm not traveling. So I'll start working with little bands and little musicians that were just starting. And that's what I'm doing now. I'm still doing that.
Are you having fun?
Yeah, and it's very rewarding, fulfilling to see these kids grow and get enthused about guitar.
To some extent, you're paying it forward then.
Yeah, I guess so.
Keeping rock and roll alive.
One artist I'm working with now she's 16. You can check out her music. We wrote a couple songs together. They're on her Instagram at Helena Harris Rocks.
Now, for folks that want to keep up with you and what's going on, do you have a website, Facebook page, anything like that you kind of update?
My Instagram is Kingdom Come Band. And if anybody wants to just email me just to see what's going on, I'm at, don't laugh, rickskills@aol.com.
A couple of questions that we always ask everyone on an interview. And you mentioned how quickly you ascended from the club level to, oh my God, look at this crowd. Was there ever a point, either before you walked on stage, while you were on stage, or after you finished on stage, where you just looked out and thought, man, this is it. This is what I've worked for the whole time?
Yeah. And I felt a little bit guilty because I knew people that were in Hollywood that have been struggling for 8 to 10 years. And I just came in a matter of months, and I'm sitting up there going, yeah, this is what I worked for all my life. But at the same time, I'm going, this was a little too easy. Something's not going to go right. But yeah, I did feel it was an amazing feeling. I mean, I'm on Monsters Rock. I'm sitting there talking to Eddie Van Halen, backstage. We're 5 months before, like I wasn't even on the scene, a Hollywood scene or any of that. I came from out of a club. Real quick, Jim, I forgot to mention, because I'm doing a lot of projects. I'm working with an original band called Joker's Revolt.
So we're going to keep an eye out for Joker's Revolt, and you're still playing some Kingdom Come gigs, right?
When I say we do gigs, what we do, gigs on a Friday. We fly in Thursday, play the gig Friday, and fly out Saturday. I mean, it's that in and out. It's that kind of thing.
And how's the reception for today's Kingdom Come? You guys really pleased with how the shows are going?
Yeah, I mean, it's the original band without the lead singer. So we got a guy named Keith St. John. He sang with Montrose.
Well, it sounds like you're still staying in the game somewhat.
Very much so. It's great because I get to play every day, and I'm still improving. When I teach guitar, I have I have 22 students. At my peak, I had 30, but I have 22 students, and they all into different types of music. So it's really fun. I'm enjoying the hell out of it.
And who knows, you may have a future rock star in that group.
I might have 3 or 4. I will keep everyone abreast of that. One of my students is playing with Slash. So that's and in interviews, he was a beginner. And so he's, I'm looking forward to him breaking through. And then this girl, this Helena Harris, and this other kid, we'll see what Max is. There might be 4. Yeah. We'll keep an eye on them.
Rock and roll never dies. So we need new players.
Yep, exactly.
Well, Rick, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day to be with us and sharing some of your great rock stories.
Well, I enjoyed it. Thanks, Jim, for having me on.
In this week's covers, we have a suggestion we think you're really going to enjoy. In 1969, the Rolling Stones included the song Gimme Shelter on their album Let It Bleed, and that featured backup vocals from Mary Clayton. A few years later, Clayton would provide backup vocals on Lynyrd Skynyrd's Sweet Home Alabama. In 1971, Grand Funk Railroad included a version of Give Me Shelter on their album Survivor. But the one we're going to recommend is from the 1975 Grand Funk live album Caught in the Act, and it's available on iTunes. Give it a listen. We think you'll really like it. We have Richie Ranno with us today from Stories and Starz. Richie, welcome to the Southern Voice Rock Show.
Always a pleasure. I love the South.
You have an exemplary career in rock and roll. Before Starz, you were in a band, Bungie, and a gig in New Jersey connected you with some folks that led to you joining Stories that had a #1 song with Brother Louie. How did that happen?
I met a lot of those people down in the Washington, D.C. area who were all in Ocean City that summer. And we had exchanged numbers, and I stayed in touch with them. And they said, this one guy said, come down here. I got a really great band. We need a guitar player. And he said, I got a place for you to stay. This lady's house who I work with. He said he was some kind of, I don't know what business he was in, but whatever it was, she worked with him. And she's got a spare room you could stay in while we rehearse. So I did that. I went down there and nothing materialized. I was down there for a good month. I had a good time. Everybody was really nice down there. And I met a lot of great people. And one day the phone rang. And this is how crazy life is, you know. It was already weird enough that I wound up in Wisconsin. But the phone rings at this lady's house. And I said, oh, you know, I should really answer this phone call. She's at work and help her out a little bit, take a message for her. So it turns out it's her best friend from high school. He's a bit, probably 10 years older than me. And we're talking, and she's wondering what I'm doing at her house. So I explained why and all this stuff. And she said, well, what do you play? What instrument? And this is after a while of talking. And I said, guitar. She said, are you good? I said, I'm pretty good. So she goes, well, listen, would you like to audition for the group Stories? I said, Stories? Brother Louie is #1 last week. She said, yeah, that's the group. She said, my husband is their agent, and the guitar player quit, and they were auditioning on Monday. This was a Friday. I said, sure. So she gave me her husband's phone number and name, said, call him right now and tell him that I recommended it. So I did. I got the audition, came back up to New Jersey, went into the city on Monday, and oddly enough, came down to 2 guitar players, me and the guitar player from Max. How weird is that?
Small world, huh?
Yeah, I never found out how they knew each other. Although, as I recall, Stories had played in Ocean City that summer, and I think Max opened for them. So that may be where the connection was. We went every day. The 2 of us went for 4 days, Monday to Thursday, like a competition. And I remember Steve Love, the guitar player, was there at the auditions because he gave them a month's notice. He was coaching this guy. And they were like a prog rock band. I don't know if you know that. Most people don't realize that. You have to have their albums to know that. Brother Louie was just like off the wall, some song. They didn't write it or anything. They just went in and recorded. It wasn't even going to be on an album. And then it went to #1, and they reissued the album with that song on it. But that stuff was difficult to learn and play. And I was like, man, I'm figuring this out on my own. This guy's getting coached by the guitar player, you know. I said, I kept thinking I have no chance, but I just kept going back. And then Friday I showed up. We started playing a little bit. I said, hey, where's David? I still remember his name. Oh, he went back to Baltimore. You got the gig. Or wherever he was from, Washington. I said, okay, cool. And that's how I ended up in Stories.
Stories, I think at the time, also included Kenny Aronson.
Yeah, it was a great band. Kenny Aronson, the famous Kenny Aronson, one of the greatest and most successful bass players in history. Still a good friend of mine.
We mentioned Kenny last week. We do a feature called Covers. And in the early 80s, Kenny was in a supergroup with Neil Schon and Sammy Hagar, HSAS. And they did a
Whiter
cover.
Shade of Pale.
Whiter Shade of Pale, absolutely. A great version. Kenny's resume, Billy Squier, Neil Schon, Joan Jett, Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
I mean, he's...
Billy Idol.
Yeah, Billy Idol, bass player extraordinaire. So you were definitely in with some rich talent DNA.
Oh, yeah. Ian Lloyd was singing. Ian Lloyd was phenomenal. And the band was just really a great band. It was a great experience. We were on the road for about a year. And then it just dissolved. I don't even know what happened. I really don't. They just said it was over. But when I was in Stories, we had Kerner Wise were our producers. Richie Wise, Kenny Kerner and Richie Wise. And they produced the first 2 Kiss albums. So I got the first Kiss album right away. I didn't even know what the hell it was. I couldn't even figure out why their faces were like that. But Richie had said, oh, it's good hard rock. You should listen to it. So he gave it to me. I said, yeah, I like it a lot. I love that first Kiss album. That's great. So, and then we met them in L.A. We just were staying at the same hotel. That was another funny story. And we had a great time. We were playing the Whiskey. They came and hung out with us.
And when you're saying we, which band was this?
Stories. So this was 1974. They were there recording Hotter Than Hell, their second album. And so we got to be friends. We were hanging around the pool all the time and stuff. And they came to the Whiskey and hung out with us backstage. And they really liked me, as it turned out. They introduced me to Bill O'Coin, and they said, we think you're a great hard rock player. And Bill would like to manage another band. Why don't you put a group together and get managed by Bill? And I said, that's nice, thank you. But, I'm in a band with a #1 record. they were like nowhere at the time. If you think about it, they only had one album out and it didn't do that great. They made a lot of noise in the sense of, the look and everything in the show, but they really didn't have much success at that point. And I said, yeah, I can't leave a group with a number one record, but thanks, for asking. So then when the group did split up, I had a really good friend who was my guitar roadie. He was one of those faithful, great roadies who take care of their guitar player kind of guy, really good guy. So he was always looking out for me. And he knew about that I wanted to now get a group together and go to Rocksteady Management, but I couldn't find the guys. And one day he called me up. He said he had the Village Voice magazine, which was a weekly magazine. He lived in the city. I lived in New Jersey. And he said, there's a group looking for a guitar player managed by Rocksteady. He said, this is right up your alley. You should call this number right away. So I did. Got an audition, but almost didn't go because the guy on the other end of the phone was such a jerk that I wasn't even that interested. First thing he says to me, he goes, are you the greatest guitar player that ever lived? And he wasn't in the band. He was part of the management. I said, I doubt it. He said, well, then we don't need you. Oh, I said, okay. He said, we already have the greatest guitar player in the world. I said, oh, you're right. You don't need me. Now, I normally would have hung the phone up, but I really like those guys in Kiss. And I've been thinking about this Rocksteady thing anyway. So I didn't hang up. And I said, well, I'm pretty good. He goes, well, all right, you want to try out? I said, yeah, fine, yeah. So he gives me the address, and I go the next day. I was like kind of pissed off at the guy, but the guy became one of my best friends. It was Sean Delaney, who, if you Google, without me going into depth of what all the things he did in his life, he was a great guy, and we hit it off really well. So anyway, they told me I was the 75th guitarist. I don't really know. They don't really remember what number I was or anything, but I remember them telling me that. And I got there, and they were going one guitarist after another. And they'd been auditioning for about a week. And so I walked in, and nobody would make eye contact with me. I'll never forget it. And somebody pointed at the floor and said, there's your guitar cable. And then I picked up the cable and plugged it in and made some noise. And somebody started counting off a song. And I said, come on, tell me the key or something. So they said, hey. And then they started playing. And I listened for a few seconds. And then started playing. And then we played about a minute. All of a sudden, everybody just stopped. And they looked at me. And they said, so what's your name? And what have you done? And I told them who I was. And they said, oh, we were the Looking Glass. I said, really? I said, Brandy, number one. And they said, yeah. I said, oh, Stories, Brother Louie, number one. And they started laughing. And they said, yeah, we knew some of those guys, but I guess we just never knew you. I said, yeah, right, yeah. They said, wow. So they said, let's play again. So we played a few more minutes. I'll tell you something funny. They never discussed it amongst themselves. One of the guys just said, okay, you want to be in the band?
Hey, if you know, you know, right?
I said, yeah, well, that's what I came down here for. And then that was it. And then we started rehearsing, writing, really, 7 days a week. And they asked me if I wrote.
The band was known as Fallen Angels, right?
Actually, they changed the name from Looking Glass right around that time to the Fallen Angels.
Was Michael Smith already in the band at that time?
Yep. It was the exact lineup, except it was a keyboard.
At some point in time, Fallen Angel became Starz.
Yeah, we did a gig as Fallen Angels, opening up for Kiss at the Tower Theater in Philadelphia. That's with the keyboard player and everything. And it just, we knew it wasn't working, and he knew it wasn't working. So now we went to 5-piece, and management said, there's a new group called Angel, and I didn't know at that time that Frank and Barry were in it. It's kind of weird. They said there was another group called Angel City, and there's this kind of angel and that kind of angel. They said, change it. So actually, Sean Delaney came up with the name Starz.
Back to Starz, for those that are listening that aren't familiar, Starz was cited as an influence by some of the biggest bands in the world. I mean, Motley Crue, members of Metallica, Bon Jovi, Twisted Sister, Poison, all have had members that said, Starz was a giant influence.
Yeah.
What happened with Starz? Starz should have been big. Looking back, where would you lay the responsibility for Starz, let's say, maybe not reaching the potential that they could have? Was distracted management after Kiss hit it so big maybe a part of it?
Well, management was a real problem. What happened was, right before the first album came out, Kiss hit it like humongous. They became like the biggest band of 1976 in the world. His time was really tied up. He was very busy, our manager, and he was negligent in making proper decisions, which we tell him what we wanted and what we wanted to do because we knew, but he just ignored us, basically. He didn't have enough time. And I don't know. There's a book. Have you heard about the book? It was Doug Broad, the former Spin editor, Spin magazine, that editor. You remember that magazine, right?
Absolutely, yes.
So he was there, I think, about 8 or 10 years, and he wrote a book a couple of years ago called They Just Seem a Little Weird, and it's the four most influential bands, or the bands that change music forever in the future, something like that. It says, I can't remember what the thing was. It shows 4 pictures of the 4 different bands. It's Aerosmith, Kiss, Cheap Trick, and Starz. And he gets deep into interviewing all kinds of people, and it's very cool. It's a hardcover, beautiful book. And that kind of details a lot of what happened with our band. Some of it's inaccurate because some of the people that he spoke to told some inaccurate stories by mistake, I think.
Your first album was produced by Jack Douglas, who was legendary for, he was at one time such a part of Aerosmith. They used to jokingly call him, I think, the 6th member of Aerosmith.
Absolutely, and deservedly so. I love that Get Your Wings album. It's one of my favorite albums in history. And I did not like the production sound on the first Aerosmith album. I don't know if it has a title. I think it's just called Aerosmith. Dream On was certainly a great song, but I didn't like the sound of the album. I remember hearing it and thinking, don't like it. Second album came out, I went nuts. I said, this is one of the greatest rock albums in history. I just love that album. So I looked at the name of the producer, it was Jack Douglas, and I made a mental note of that guy, In 1976, when we got our Capitol deal, O'Coin said, anybody have any ideas for a producer? And I said, this is the guy. I don't know who he is, where he is, nothing about him. Look it up. And sure enough, he lived in the suburbs of New Jersey, and Jack came to see us play and liked the band and agreed to produce it. And he did the first 2 albums. They were great. Great albums, great sounding albums. The Record Plant, #1 recording studio pretty much in the world. I guess it could be debated, but it was up there,
He worked with John Lennon, Alice Cooper, Cheap Trick. His resume was very extensive, and it's hard to argue with your all's first albums. Yeah,
for sure. It's Jack always tells me more people ask him about Starz than any other act that he produced. We stay in touch from time to time. He's just a great guy, a really great producer.
What's happened in your world since Starz?
Well, a lot of things happened. Michael and I got back together and put a new group together in 1982 or 3 called Hellcats. And we did a 5-song hard rock EP that, to me, I think it's the best thing that we've ever done. I know it's not a Starz album, but we changed the name only at last minute out of respect for the other members of Starz who weren't in it. We just felt like, if we keep calling it Starz, it's disrespectful to those guys. And probably a big mistake, but not as big a mistake as the record deal we signed with Radio Records, which was part of Atlantic. And the album comes out, and it's doing really great. I'm going to go on a tour with Ted Nugent, and we're thinking, wow, this is a great chance for us. And boom, the record company goes under. And Atlantic just wouldn't pick it up. Atlantic said, no, it's not our label. It's a subsidiary type thing. So Michael had moved to L.A. prior, and I lived out here, and we just couldn't get it together. After that, I kind of drifted away from making albums and stuff, but I did make one solo album around that time, and that was about it. I guess, I just kind of got out of music. And then in 92, we got back together and made an album. Couldn't get a deal. We put it out on our own. We call it Requiem.
And that was under the name Starz.
Under the name Starz, yeah. That was, actually it was Brendan Harkin, the original guitar player with me, playing bass. Me on guitar, Michael Lee on vocals, and it was a 4-piece again. And the drummer was Doug Maddock, who was the drummer from Hellcats, because Doobie had stopped playing for a period of time at that time, our original drummer. Once again, that was 92. No rock bands again. It was all the grunge thing. So it was a third bad timing situation. But whatever. And then in 1997, I just said, I don't want to do this anymore. And I stopped playing completely. I mean, just playing at home, no gigs. And then I got back into playing slowly, and then we put Starz back together in 2003, and we do shows every year. COVID took a big toll on us, but and that's about it. And I have local bands that I play with up here in North Jersey and a little bit in New York State. And I do a lot of solo acoustic gigs, too.
Richie, is there a Starz show on the calendar for 2023?
No, we did one in March, and I don't know if we're going to do any more. I mean, we'd like to, but we got to get an agent. It's not that easy.
So how was the crowd reaction to Starz 2023?
Well, we played in northern New Jersey, a show with Angel, and it was packed, and it was a great crowd. They loved us, and they really appreciated what we were doing, and it was really rewarding for us all. And it keeps you going. It's fun. It's nice to have loyal fans all these years, and we get new fans from time to time. That's also cool.
So when folks that live in your part of the world, New Jersey, New York, or folks that are traveling there, they have an opportunity to maybe catch you live out playing somewhere close to home, right?
Yeah. All my gigs that I do are listed on our starscentral.com. That's our website, Starz with a Z, of course, starscentral.com. And we offer stuff for sale on it, T-shirts.
All featuring the incredible Starz logo, I may add.
Of course.
Well, Richie, I can't thank you enough for being with us. Your time in Stories, your time in Starz, you guys just had so much of an impact. You were and are such a presence in rock and roll's history. And I can't thank you enough for taking time to be with us.
Well, thank you for having me, Jim. It's nice to be remembered.
This week's Hidden Gem is a band called Little America. They came on the scene in the mid-'80s, released 2 albums, and after the second one sold poorly, they were dropped by their label, and the band went its separate ways. Their drummer, Kurt Custer, went on to play for Steve Earle and Leonard Skinner. The 2 original albums are not available on iTunes, but last year, an anthology with 33 tracks from the band was released, and it is available on iTunes. Give it a listen. I think you'll like what you hear. Hey, we want to thank our guests Moses Moe, Richie Ranno, and Rick Steier. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Southern Voice Rock Show.
Thanks for listening.